started off traveling. I bought my first camera before I went to Thailand when I was 20. And on that trip, it just kind of like, I was obsessed with just capturing everything. I mean, it was an exotic place and all that kind of stuff, so it's pretty natural to be that way, I think. But when I got home, it stuck with me, and for a few years, as a hobby, it was a really big part of my life. Then you know, after university, I was kind of directionless, didn't know exactly how I wanted to take my undergrad. I'd studied filmmaking and anthropology, and I decided to commit to photography and enrolled at the Prairie View School of Photography. I just realized that photography was the thing I cared about most. It was what was occupying my heart at that time, you know, and I mean, I was happy with everything I studied in school. Film was something I was interested in before, like I studied it, but I think it was just a bit daunting to get into the film industry. Like, you don't just make a film on your own. The creative process has so many levels. There's such ladders to climb. You know, you're a grip, or you're a PA, or you're a boom guy, and I just felt like the creative process of photography was more within my control, and that a photo could tell a story. You didn't necessarily need to make a whole film to do that. So yeah, it was just a matter of kind of following my heart, really. But my career as a photographer evolved a lot since just enrolling at the Prairie View School of Photography, right? Now I'm a photojournalist, I'm a documentary photographer, and at the time, I just knew I loved photography, right? So you can take photography in so many different ways, right? So as a career, it took me some time to figure out that this was more the path that I wanted to do, that I wanted to be a narrative photographer, that I wanted to tell stories with my images. That's a question I always kind of struggle with. I mean, I look at a lot of photography, but I try not to be specifically influenced by the work of others in really direct ways. I mean, I've had mentors, and I think one of my mentors is this guy named Donald Weber, and he's a great photographer. He won World Press Photo a couple of years ago for this long-term project he'd done in Russia, this interrogation sequence. Anyways, his mentorship kind of told me that you kind of have to commit to the story that you care about, that you need to really put your heart into something and tell your story, instead of just being an employee for a newspaper, or you know, it's very easy as a photographer just to take the jobs that come to you and just kind of follow that path. His influence was that, you know, go find your story, find your voice, what do you have to say, that's what makes photography interesting. And so for me, his influence was really strong in my career. But in terms of, you know, what photographers do am I passionate about? I mean, there's so many great photographers out there that I don't know, I can't just pick one and say that this was who influenced me in my path. Yeah, I don't think I would have started it had I not thought that I could make a living from it. I mean, there are photographers out there, you know, it's like, this is a career. So I always knew that it would be hard. I think it was kind of like, it's a dream job, right? It's that kind of job that, you know, you're chasing your dream, right? And you know that you might not make it, you know not everybody can. But there's a lot of jobs like that. There's a lot of, you know, paths like that. So I mean, I was never under the illusion that it would be easy or that I would necessarily for sure succeed, but I believed in myself, you know. I thought I had a talent that if I worked at it, I could maybe make it work. Yeah. But I mean, it's still tough. You know, it's like the phone's not always ringing. You know, the jobs aren't always coming in. So even though I have a career and I have a name, there's always so many new photographers coming out, and the industry is constantly shifting. And it's like, and just because I'm secure at this moment doesn't mean I'm going to be secure in 5 years. So that's something that, you know, you kind of always struggle with, I think, in this industry. Well, I think after this program, I did like, you know, some family portraiture and some stuff like that, and it felt good. I mean, it felt good to get paid for my work. But as a photojournalist, I got an internship at the Toronto Star, and that was the first time that I was, you know, actually, like I was on actually salary. I think that's the only time I've ever really been on salary. But that was great, you know, to get a paycheck every week. But every job, every time the phone rings and I do a job, it feels good. I mean, technology, I mean, at that time in 2006, it was the beginning of the digital shift. So when I was studying here, we had digital cameras, right? That was pretty much everybody in the class had a digital camera. We were still learning in the darkroom, we were still shooting a lot of film. So I mean, once I started freelancing and working in the industry, I was in the digital world. So really that hasn't created much of a shift. I think a bigger shift industry-wide is more the video shift. Media generally wanted more video-focused kind of content and stuff like that, which I didn't fully commit to personally, which, for better or worse, you know, a lot of people that I know ended up doing a lot of work and doing really well in video, but now I see them and they're like mostly all video. So, you know, it's hard to do, I think, both really well. Some people can do it, and it's something that I'd like to do more of, I think. But in terms of my personal photography, I still shoot a lot of film. It creates an aesthetic and approach that that I can't replicate with digital. And using an old camera, it changes your relationship to your subject and all these things, right? So I think that there's, you know, you're making images, and each tool you use is going to influence the outcome. And just because the technology is here and there's new technology doesn't mean that has to be what you're using. Documentary photography is, for me, it's you have a ticket to the world. People open their doors, right? You're interested in something, you go, you have a reason to go beyond just your interest, right? And if you're just interested and you showed up at somebody's door and you said, hey, I'm interested in you, tell me your story, right? I mean, you're here documenting me. It's journalism. It's the idea of having people share their stories with you and being able to walk into their lives. And with documentary photography, it's not just a day. You know, you can spend weeks or months or years in these places, you know, experiencing these stories and telling people stories. And it's amazing because not only are you getting experiences and photos out of it, you're building relationships, and these experiences are shifting your perspective and how you see the world and who you are as a person. So it's a real, like, transformative experience, documentary photography, you know? The thing, I struggle a little bit with the idea of too close. I mean, for me, when I went to Northern Alberta with part of this work in the oil sands, I spent, you know, more than 6 months up there over a couple of years, and the first trip was like 4 months. And I got very close to the community and some of the families and people there, like, you know, very close. And I continue those relationships today, you know. And so, I mean, for me, these people they aren't just subjects. They're friends. They're people I care about, people I love. You get that, you know. That's as close as you get when somebody's in your heart, you know. But I think that, you know, it depends on the kind of journalism you're doing, you know. It's like, if you want to be real objective, like full on, like these are the facts, etc., then it's kind of dangerous to get that close, because there's, it might skew how you're going to tell a story. You might leave certain things out. But with documentary photography, it's more of a subtle way of communicating, right? You're using images to communicate. So like all the hard facts of somebody's story don't have to be included all the time, right? You don't have to explain every single detail. It can be a bit more subjective about like, what is this story that's happening, rather than what is this specific situation with this person. Whereas if you're writing an article about somebody, you got to be careful about that kind of thing. But no, I think getting close, get closer. The more you care, the more invested you're going to be, the better work you're going to make. That's what I think. That picture's taken in Brazil in the Xingu River, which is right after, yeah, right after they flooded the river with the third largest, fourth largest dam in the world, kind of depends who you ask, the Belamonte Dam. So, I mean, these guys in the tree are just swimming. They're just having a good time, just climbing that tree and jumping off it. The tree's gone now. That dam displaced over 20,000 people who were living along that river and changed a pristine Amazon ecosystem. Yeah, it's pretty much really destroyed a lot of the lives of the people down there. So, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful photograph, but there's kind of a dark undercurrent to what's going on. You'd be surprised. I mean, it's about spending the time. It's about being there and getting out and looking, you know? Like for this one, I was out with my friend on a motorcycle driving around. We had gone to some of the neighborhoods that were being impacted, and we were just driving back to the city, and we came across this scene. So it was just timing, it was luck. I mean, not every photo is luck, but there's always an element of luck. It's the elements of light and subject and your placement and the meaning of what these things coming together and how you see it, what that communicates, all coming together at once. And you're not really controlling it. You're just there at the right time and sensitive to the fact that it's happening, and you're able to capture it. So, you know, it's about having that sensitivity to be able to recognize when all these elements are coming together and having that, you know, ability to capture it. But, you know, it's not just luck, obviously, it's being there, you know, and that just takes commitment, you know. Well, I don't really, I mean, it's tough to say. I think I think photos are more powerful when people come to their own conclusions about them. But I certainly have a perspective, my own personal perspective, which influences, you know, my reason for taking these photos and, you know, why I selected these particular ones to put on the wall, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and there are statements that kind of go along with them. But these are documentary stories. So they're about something happening in a place and a time, you know. And so I want to tell you what that story is. And then I want to show you these photos that are through my eyes of how I feel about this story. And it's up to you to, you know, interpret that your way, right? Based on your own subjective lens, you know. You can't force somebody to think a certain way, but you can kind of guide them a little bit, maybe. That's a good question, and I think it's one that I need to ask, like, it's important for me to ask myself that question. I think when I started, I was just more curious. It was like what was driving me was more my curiosity. And now there's a little bit more of a sense of purpose. Like, okay, this, you know, this isn't about you and your curiosity as much as it is about, you know, what are you trying to do? You know, what is the point? You know? So I'm thinking about that more, trying to make the impact of the work more important than just the experience of taking it and that part of it, right? There's two sides to a photo. There's the creation side, and then there's everything after, right? And that's what we're here for today, really. You know, it's part of that. So I think, yeah, my motivation, I think it's a similar motivation in terms of what the story is, what I'm trying to communicate. And that's really about the importance of nature, I think, and our human relationship with it, and how that's out of balance, you know, to have a look at that, and to also explore that for myself. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think about it that way. I think, sure, I'm a kid from Winnipeg, but there are Winnipeggers all over the world doing amazing things, you know? I'm just a person. You could be from anywhere. Doesn't matter, you know? I think, so I'm not going to define myself by, like, the limits of a perception of where I'm from, and I don't think anybody should ever. I mean, that's a challenge. I think you have to do that kind of intermittently because, I mean, for me, it's like, I mean, photography, you know, you learn your tool, right? And I learned my tool a long time ago, kind of thing, you know? It's like, it's a photograph. It doesn't change that much. Cameras haven't changed in, you know, 50 years, really. Like, the technology inside the cameras have changed. They focus a bit different, you know? I mean, one of the cameras I still use is like 50 years old, you know? So, in terms of that, and in terms of the kind of images that I take, which are technically very simple, right? I'm using, you know, it's documentary, so it's natural light, all that kind of stuff. So there's not really a lot of technical layers to it. You know, so really it's more about researching the stories, just like being more aware, reading books, just like reading articles, just kind of like trying to be aware of what's happening in the world, trying to change your thinking, trying to, you know, evolve your mind, and then that informs the work, rather than trying to learn how to light something or, you know, be technically proficient in a way that I'm not. Although, if say I was doing more video work, which I should be, just based on, you know, you can make some good money doing it, and you know, it's best to have all the tools in the book. I think the internet's an amazing place for that, right? It's like you can learn so many things on YouTube, and there's so many tutorials for video and stuff like that. So. I think the difficulty with photography is that it's a very insular, it can be a very insular thing. It's just you and the camera, really, right? Sure, you've got subjects or whatever, but really it's about communication. So it's about relationships, right? And that's something that you know, you need to know. You're not going to get work unless you're networking with people, you're getting yourself out there, right? So, and you're not going to communicate your stories, and your photos aren't going to do anything when they're sitting in a filing cabinet or on a hard drive somewhere, right? So it's really about creating relationships and finding community, because community is so powerful. Photography community, a journalism community, they support each other. So once you're part of that, once you make something and you show it to the community, they're going to help you get your work out there. So that's I think, you know, a key lesson to photography is that you can't insulate yourself. You've got to be out there interacting with the world, getting your work out there. I'm hoping actually to continue. I went up to northern Manitoba a couple of years ago. I'm interested in the history of hydro in our province. So that's a project that I'm interested in kind of continuing to explore. So there's a lot of history and a lot of changes happening in the north of our province that I'm interested in exploring. So I'm thinking turning my lens on my home backyard kind of thing. If I can go to the Amazon and do it, why can't I drive 8 hours north, 10 hours north?